Hey guys, what's up and welcome to this live stream on Instagram. Normally I do a Suki Likes promo session, live session on Facebook today. But today I want to do something new. I'm gonna do a talk with Jeffrey from the Goose Mastering about mastering and studio acoustics, because a lot of people have questions about that, including me of course. And I wanted to have a live chat with him, with you guys here in the chat room. So you guys can ask him questions as well. A lot of you guys already asked some of the things on my Facebook, on my group. So I'll take a few questions from there. But first, let's invite him into the conversation. See, I'm just waiting for him to join the conversation. Hey, what's up, Jeffrey?
Hey man, how you doing?
All good, man. Good to have you here.
Good, yeah, good to be here. And it looks like it's working.
Yeah, it's something different, right?
Yeah, totally different.
Nice. Well, thanks for your time first, man.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And yeah, let's hopefully we can help a few people out here, because yeah, we were already chatting. We did a podcast about, I think already like a half a year ago or something. It's
yeah, somewhere in September or October or something like that. What if I remember correctly, indeed.
Yeah, it's been a long time, and I actually got a lot of positive reactions from that, and a lot of people were wondering that they just wanted to know more about mastering actually.
Yeah,
and we also visited your studio with a few of my clients already 2-3 months back, and they were also blown away by all the facts and stuff and all the wisdom you have on mastering. So I thought it was a nice idea to do this live stream for the people who are interested in this and who want to know more about mastering, but also studio acoustics, because I think that's a really underestimated thing when it comes down to music production.
Totally. Yeah.
So yeah, let's get started. Actually, I already have a few questions which people have sent in before we started. So shall we just start with those? Is that
Sure.
okay?
Just go ahead and see where we're heading. So
cool.
Yeah.
By the way, to everyone who's checking in right now, welcome to this live stream. It's a conversation with Jeffrey from the Goose Music, and we're going to talk about mastering and studio acoustics today. So first question comes from Nico Breuer. He says, what's the best alternative when your room sucks and you are not really able to install useful acoustic treatment?
Well, actually, there is no real alternative. The only alternative that you have could be maybe headphones, but headphones are simply different than monitors, because you physically have them on your ears, and it's totally different than when you have speakers in front of you. The sound is different, and there is not really an alternative actually. So if you have your speakers in your living room or whatever, something like that, and your studio set up, it's still best to have at least some acoustical treatment, because like I said, there is no real alternative. Even you have like the software solutions where they claim that you can get rid of problems in your room.
Yeah, he also asked about, is that the SonarWorks that you're talking about?
Yeah, you have a lot of these things like the SonarWorks, but yeah, you have quite a lot of things like that. But you can't beat the law of physics. If you have a problem in your room, you have a problem in your room, and you simply cannot fix it by adding software like that, because what they claim is that they can get rid of the problems in your room. So let's say you have a dip at 50 hertz, and there's also a timing problem at 50 hertz, because usually when you have a dip or a peak, it's not just a peak or dip, but there's also something in the time domain. And they say that you can solve it with like a room EQ. In theory, that's true, but in practice, it will always be that when you try to correct that is only for one specific spot where you did the measurement, and if you move your head, let's say 5 centimeters to the left or 5 centimeters to the right, that the problem is even worse than without the room acoustic, with the room treatment, the electronic treatment.
So when there's a problem in your room, there's no software which is able
No
to change that. You have to change the room physically.
No, yeah. It could be, by the way, that if you have a lot of acoustical treatment, like bass traps and or whatever you need, and you also have software like that, it could maybe bring it up 5% more. So from 95% you can bring it to 100%. But still, if you move your head to the left or to the right, it could be totally different. So that will always be a problem. So never trust those software solutions.
Never trust software. And just to give the people an idea, the studio room you have, is that something you've just set up in your home garage, or is it something you've built from the ground on?
It's funny that you mentioned garage, because it used to be a garage. When we bought the house, when we needed a new house, and we were looking for a house where we also had a big space from a studio. And it used to be a garage. It used to be a car painting shop. And you can, when it was with a leaking roof and things, and when we bought it, and it was about 13 meters long and about 3.5 to 4 meters wide. And it was split in half, so the studio is about 7 meters long now. And it was done not from the ground up, but the actual walls and things were done from the ground up, indeed. Yeah. Okay,
so you actually built the room to make it a studio eventually. You thought about measurements and sizes and materials and all those things.
Really true. Yeah. Okay. And after that, I needed a lot of acoustical treatment as well, because I can show you around.
You see it on the background, the panels.
Yeah, you see on the background, you see 6 really big bass traps there, which are tuned bass traps, dedicated made for my room by JIK Acoustics. And then you have, I'm not sure if you can see them, 3 on each side. You can see 6 big bass traps. And if you look at the ceiling, let's see if that works. You can see another 6 bass traps. If here you can see another 2 bass traps and the complete back wall. It's hard to see, but the complete back wall is also a bass trap. And that's not all, because I'm not sure if you can see it, there's also 2 really big bass traps on the floor behind the desk. So in total it's like 20-25 bass traps, and also, see if I can put it on the screen. Yeah, you can also see some what you call diffusers as well. Yeah. So it's not just bass traps. You also need diffusion, like diffusing some
the higher frequencies, right?
High frequencies. You want to diffuse them so that they're not simply bouncing off the wall. So I used a lot of acoustical treatment, and most of it was measured and some of them even custom built by JIK Acoustics. It's an American company, but they also have a couple of shops in Germany, but also in the UK and in France and in Italy. And it's really cool because actually a couple of weeks ago they released a tool which you can download for your phone, and then you can do some measurements in your room so that you can see the actual size of your room and do some measurements. And from that point, they can see how large your room is and what the problematic frequencies will be. Of course, it's not like it's going to be exact measurements. And for exact measurements, you will also need software like Room EQ Wizard, which is a freeware software. RW Room EQ Wizard. You can download it, and then you have like a pretty simple measurement microphone. Actually, it's a Behringer. I think it's an ECM 8000 or something like that. It's, I think, 40-50 euros maybe. And you can do a measurement. And it's not just a measurement that you have peaks and dips, because all rooms will have peaks and dips. But you will also have problems in the time domain. So, how do I explain simply? The waves are bouncing back from the back wall, for instance, and they come back to you at a later time. So it could be that you have phase shift and things like that as well. And those could that's
the tough thing with the software. It isn't able to measure that, right?
Yeah, it can measure that, and it can compensate for that, but it's not you still have the problem. You still have the back wall. You still have the side walls. You still have the ceiling where the problems all are. And it's
Okay.
not like it can fix those problems. It's simple as that. You can't beat the law of physics.
Okay.
And the only thing that will work is acoustical treatment. Simple as that.
Yeah.
So yeah, you need a lot of bass trapping. And the lower the frequencies, the bigger the bass traps. To give you an idea, the tuned bass traps, which you see in the back, they are tuned at 47 hertz. Because
they're custom made, right? It's not something you just bought online. They're custom made.
Yeah, and they resonate at 47 hertz. And around 47 hertz, not exactly, of course. But because they resonate at 47 hertz, the resonation could be dampened with the material behind it. And you need to measure it exactly to get to that frequency point. And you need, like, in this case, I have 6 of those traps, and it's pretty expensive to do it like that.
It's quite an expensive hobby.
True. But if you're serious about your music, you should also be serious about the room acoustics. Simple as that. Because, if you have problems, and that will always be in the low frequencies, if you have problems in the low frequencies, you can never make proper decisions when it comes to the low end. Simple as that. It's not possible.
Can you compare it with like having a car that looks like a Ferrari but has a motor inside from a Renault or Peugeot or whatever?
Yeah, something like that. How I sometimes compare it is if you're a graphic designer and you need to more like a photographer, and you need to make the pictures you took, and you have to color match it with the real colors and things. But you have blurry glasses on, and you also have a shitty monitor. You can see colors, you can see red, green, and blue, but it's not exactly how they are. It's simply not possible to make the picture look cool, because with the right colors, because you don't actually see the right colors. It's the same with the audio. If you have problems in your room, you will never hear what the actual audio is.
Okay. Kind of it's pretty clear to me, and I think Nico already replied as well that he was what did he say? He said nailed it, thanks. So he's good to go with this question. To everyone who just checked in, this is a conversation with Jeffrey. He's from the Goose Music, the Goose Mastering. And we're talking about studio acoustics, but also mastering. So if you have a question, just dropping down in the comment sections. There's a few people who already sent in their question before we started in my Facebook community group. There's a question from Guillaume. He asks, what stuff to buy first in order to build a home studio?
I also do lectures at SAE in Amsterdam, and actually, one of the things that I always mention when my studio would burn down now, the first thing I would do is rebuild the actual building, because you need a building, simple as that. I would invest in acoustical treatment, and then comes the monitor, and then the rest, like the computer and things like that. Because, to me, it's the most important to have the room acoustics in order. And it's the same with if you have if you spend like $1 gazillion on monitoring. If you put them in a shitty room with no room acoustic taken care of, they will behave like shitty speakers. Simple as that.
So first step will be the building, the actual building, the actual room, and then it's studio acoustics.
The acoustics,
and then it's like the speakers and the computer and all those things that come then. But because I think a lot of producers, at least I always get the question like, I want to invest in my studio. What should I buy? Should I buy this $2,000 speakers? And I'm always saying like, you can buy those speakers, but if your room is shitty, nothing's gonna work for you. Invest into your room and see if you're able to create a better room there. Okay.
I'm still there because I think we lost the connection. We're back.
You're back.
Simple as that. Because, like I said, if you have the room acoustics, they're all good. And if you put in okay speakers, it will still sound good. It will sound like okay speakers. But if you have really great speakers and a shitty room, it will sound like a shitty listening environment. Simple as that.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
room acoustics are more than a lot of people realize.
Okay. He also has another question. How do you choose a place to install your home studio?
And in what way?
Well, let's say you have a spare room in your house, and
Yeah.
how do you choose a place to install your desk with the speakers? Like, what are things that you
Okay,
have
like that.
to look out for?
Yeah. It's always best to have things in the middle of the room. Let's say not just in the left corner or the right corner or something like that. Always put it in the middle of the room. So not just on the left or the right. Because what will happen, you will have phase shift. You will always have problems, no
Hmm.
matter what, but you will have more problems if you put it on the left or on the right side more. Um,
Okay.
and it's always best to have your speakers in the length of your room. So let's say your room is 5 by 3 meters wide, then it's best to have your speakers on the wall with where it's 3 meters wide, and have it in length where it's 5 meters,
Hmm.
because yeah, then you have the biggest chance of um, getting the room to sound right after acoustical treatment, of course. So
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. So
yeah,
send it out in the room, and especially in the length of the room. That's
the length of the room. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And
Okay.
there's like a golden rule where you should be sitting when it comes to length of your room. It's, and I do it out of my mind, but I think it's 68% versus 32%. Is that 100%? Yeah, that's 100%. You're sitting at 32% of the length of your room, and you have 68% in the back of you. So
Okay.
it's kind of like the one third, two
Yeah,
third.
exactly. One third of the room, that's where you have to
Yeah,
be, and
yeah.
yeah, behind you have to be
It's
the rest
not
of the
it's
room.
not always the case, because it could be that you have a room with a particular length and a particular width, and it sounds better when you're not sitting at one third, but let's say at a quarter or
Yeah.
the middle. It really depends.
And
But
is there also, because you mentioned a few of those rules, when it comes down to music production, there really aren't any rules. Is it the same with studio acoustics? Like, there are a few rules, but always use your ears, like whatever
yeah,
rule you have, if it sounds bad, move things around.
yeah, true, totally true. Yeah, and the cool thing is that a lot of people claim that it's a bad thing to have your speakers to the back wall,
Mm-hmm.
to have exactly at your back wall. Some people, some speaker manufacturers claim that they should not be mounted directly to your back wall, or your front wall, because that will give problems. But
Mm-hmm.
actually, you also have those in mount, if in wall mount speakers, where the speakers are mounted in the wall,
Yeah.
and they actually work best. It's just a matter of perspective, how how, yeah, it's just a matter of trying things out. It could be that they sound great at 10 centimeters from the back wall or the front wall, depends on where you're looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could be that they sound best when you put them exactly at the wall, or maybe 50 centimeters away from the wall. It really depends um, on the speakers, on the room. So it's also a matter of, yeah, just give it a try. So,
Okay.
by the way, when it comes to room acoustics, you see a lot of those foam panels, like yeah, the pretty cheap foam
The cheaper
panels.
acoustic panels, yeah.
Yeah, trust me, it's a waste of money. Foam panels will do nothing. Foam is cool for a foam party, not for acoustical treatment. It will do nothing. Yeah, maybe it will dampen some mid frequencies and some high frequencies,
Yeah.
but it will not do anything in low frequencies below, let's say, 200 hertz, and
No,
that's
no,
what they are.
but it
Simple
does
as
work
that.
for
They will
like the
not.
middle and higher frequencies, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The biggest problems will always be in the low frequencies. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions that you have? How do you install acoustic panels? Yeah, we already talked about that. Let's see. Do you need a special treatment with a professional, or can you do it yourself? That's a good question.
Yeah,
Can you
definitely. Yeah,
yeah, can you do it yourself? Is that
you can do
possible?
it yourself. Actually, in the beginning, I was making my own panels, and it's really not that hard to make, because you just have to buy a lot of rock wool. But you have to be careful, because you need the right density, because you have like the rock wool that you buy at a
Hmm.
Gamma or a Praxis or whatever,
Hmm.
and that could do a decent job, but you need more thickness, more density. And the thing is that it will take you a lot of time to make those panels. That's the main problem. If you have a lot of time, you can do it yourself. But if you, for instance, if you go to GIK Acoustics, they know exactly what material to use. They know exactly how to make those panels. And because they make a lot of those panels, they are not even that expensive. So if you take the time and the money, the time you spend compared to the money you spend on buying them from GIK Acoustics or some other brand, I think it's better to go that way. They will look better.
Yeah.
They will work for sure because they have a proven concept, and it will save you a lot of time. And they have the material to hang them on the wall as well. And the cool thing is that, for instance, GIK Acoustics is also, if you give them an email or give them a call or whatever, they will give you advice on what to use, how to. They ask for the room sizes and some pictures.
Okay,
and,
so they measure it for you.
Yeah, the measurements and things, and they can look at it, and they can advise you on what panels to use and how to use them. Because if you do it yourself, they will work. But I think buying them will simply be better.
When I started building my own studio, I also went to like the how do you call it? Yeah, like the Gamma and stuff. To the local hardware shop. That's what I meant. The local hardware shop. And I also got like that foam materials, but the more thicker stuff. And also the back wall, I completely stuffed it with iso wool. And that really worked for me. But of course, it wasn't like the 100% best studio. It was a nice studio, better than my home studio actually. So your advice when it comes down to hiring a professional or do it yourself, it's better to hire a professional eventually.
Yeah, there's a rule where they say that so you think hiring a professional is expensive. Wait until you have someone who is not a professional do it for you. So
then do it again and again.
I don't know the exact rule what it was, but it was something like that. So yeah,
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Okay. To everyone who's checking in the last few minutes, welcome to the live stream. This guy is Jeffrey from the Goose Mastering. We're having a talk about studio acoustics and mastering of your music. Last time we also spoke about mastering, and there's a podcast online which you can look back at if you want to. If you have a question for him about your studio or about your mastering, drop it in the comment section. But first, let's go to a question from David Erp, which he had asked me on the Facebook group. Dave says, last time Jeffrey said he doesn't like the isotope ozone exciter. What saturation plugins would he recommend for mastering in the box? FabFilter Saturn? Question mark.
Yeah, indeed, I'm not a big fan of the ozone exciter. I'm not a big fan of exciters at all, to be honest. It's most of the times, especially when you use an exciter and you're using it in the high frequencies, it will sound edgy, it will sound sharp, it will sound like ear piercing. And in the low frequencies, a lot of times it will sound unnatural, like you added a lot of low frequencies, like really sub-low frequencies, but it sounds unnatural. So it's not like I'm not a big fan of exciters, of the exciter of ozone. It's more like I'm not a big fan of exciters in general. But actually, if you're using some saturation plugins, like a compressor or whatever, what you're basically doing with that is adding second or third harmonics. So, for instance,
fake frequencies.
Sorry?
Like fake frequencies, actually.
Fake frequencies, yeah, simple as that. Because let's say you want to add some bottom to your low end, and you're adding second harmonics. So you have a bass drum or a bass line at 50 hertz. It's adding second harmonics at 100 hertz, 200 hertz, and the like. So you get more bottom, but you don't hear exactly what is going on. And the same in the high frequencies. If you're adding distortion, what you're basically doing with adding harmonics. Let's say you have a hi-hat. You're adding those harmonics, and it could be that it sounds a bit more fresh and open. But you really have to be careful, because if you overdo it, it will sound edgy, or it will sound unnatural or boomy. Or you have to be really careful with those kind of plugins.
Yeah.
And it's also with hardware. If you're using hardware, everybody's like, yeah, hardware always sounds better. Total bullshit, because hardware sounds cool, but I also do quite a lot of hardcore, for instance. And if I use hardware there, it's already distorted. There's already a lot of harmonics. So if I would pass it through a tube compressor, for instance, it will be one big mess because of the added harmonics. So it's not like harmonics and analog is always the thing to do, because yeah, it will work if it works, and if it's not working, don't use it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Now, what's your thought on the universal audio card, like the UAT card? Because it's kind of hardware, you know, but in the end it's software. What's your opinion on that? Do you like those plugins?
I'm being totally honest. I never ever heard them. But
Really?
what I understand is that they are great indeed. So, and one of the cool things is that you have to use some kind of hardware. But on the other side is that people think that you're using hardware, but you're not using hardware. You're simply not using your computer for the DSP power.
Yeah, exactly.
And in the past, your computer was not fast enough to have a decent DSP, but nowadays your computer is simply fast enough for a DSP. So.
Yeah. Okay, so going back to the question from David, what would you recommend for mastering in the box when it comes down to exciters? Because you're not the biggest fan, but if you had to use one, or what would you do?
When it comes to adding second harmonics, the Fab filter, I think it's called the Saturn, could be pretty cool.
Yeah.
But you have to be careful, because it's not just a mastering plugin. It's also for adding a lot of distortion for guitars, drums, whatever you want to use it for. But you could use it for mastering as well. To be honest, I never used it, but I used it maybe once or twice in the past. But also, I'm using the PSP mastering edition, some kind of tube simulation plugin from PSP, and it sounds pretty good. It adds some harmonics, and if I compare it to the tube compressor that I'm using, the actual hardware, it comes pretty close. Still, it doesn't. It's not comparable because it's hardware versus software. That's not something I want to discuss about, but still, it comes pretty close, and it sounds pretty good. And you have quite a lot of those plugins as well. You also have the Slate digital things. I'm not a big fan of how those guys market their plugins. So
why is that?
I don't have plugins. If the marketing would be different, I would probably use it. But the way they are marketing it is like McDonald's or something like that. So I'm not a big fan of that. I heard some pretty good things about it. So yeah, they could be cool.
Okay.
Also the tape plugins.
He also said the virtual tape machine. I actually don't know it, but maybe you know it.
Yeah. You have like a virtual tape plugin. You have like a couple of them. The funny thing is that people think that when they hear a plugin that they are listening to the sound of tape.
Okay.
But it's not. If you listen to a pretty good Studio A80 tape machine, a Studio A80 machine will sound way more transparent and way more clean and way more open than the best DA converters you can have.
And they are actually talking about the real one, right? Not the plugin.
The real proper setup tape machine. It will sound better than a DA converter. Yeah, sure, you have some background, but yeah.
Yeah, I actually used what's it called from the Waves pack. Shit, I forgot the name. I actually use a tape recorder in the Waves pack, which I always use on my mastering channel. And that's just because it adds some kind of warmth to it. I can't really explain how it works or what it does, but it adds that extra layer to it, which makes it a little bit more fatter in the lower frequencies and makes it a bit more warmer.
Yeah. There is, for instance, we just talked about Ozone in the Ozone 8 Advanced. I'm not sure if it's already in the 8 Ozone, the regular Ozone 8, but in the advanced version, you also have kind of like a tape simulator, and every now and then I even use it. But you have to be careful because my thought is that Ozone is marketing the plugin as if it's specific for mastering, but the way they set it up, I think it's not suitable for mastering, because mastering is about really small steps. But for instance, the tape plugin, I'm not sure about the values, but you only have to use maybe like 5% to make it sound the way you want it to sound. But then you still have 95% left on the controls. So the controls should maybe be a maximum of 20% of what they have right now.
Yeah, less sensitive.
I don't like the exciter, but the same with the exciter. And there's also like the vintage EQ or something like that. It's the same thing. You can boost and cut like 15 or 20 dB. That's not something you do in mastering. The steps should be way smaller for mastering. So
it's a good one. So
so
when it comes down to mastering, you don't really actually change that much to a track. It's like the subtle, small things you change.
Yeah. When it comes to EQ, for instance, when I'm boosting or cutting more than 3 dB, when it comes to EQing, there's most of the time something wrong with the mix. Mastering when it comes to EQ is about half a dB there, 1 dB there. Cutting 500 hertz for 1.5 dB, for instance. These kind of values I'm talking about, like really small steps. Most of the times you don't hear what you actually did, but in the end, when you compare it to the mix, you're like, okay, so that's the difference.
Yeah,
so
if you A/B test it, actually.
Yeah, and you can only hear those really small changes when your room acoustics and your monitoring is great, because otherwise you simply don't even hear those changes, let alone knowing that you're making the right decisions. Because if you have a problem at 40 hertz and you hear a lot of build-up at 40 hertz, you will try to compensate for that by cutting maybe 4 dB at 40 hertz, which is way too much maybe. And you have no idea if your room acoustics are not the way they should be, because then you can't make the right decisions.
Okay, and taking a bit further on that, because I noticed that someone posted on my Facebook group about the YouTube upload. What did he said? That when he uploads a track on YouTube, he noticed that his track gets compressed too much. And I mentioned to him that you told me once how that works. I didn't remember the details. So here you go. Tell people what they should do when they upload a track to YouTube or Spotify, because I think Nico also asked something about that. Is there any preparation in the mixdown necessary if you want to have a Spotify iTunes version that's not as loud as the club version?
The cool thing nowadays is that you don't have to focus on making it loud, because the louder you go, the more you lose. The main focus is making it sound good. And it really doesn't matter if it's, let's say, minus 12 dB LUFS or minus 2 dB LUFS, whatever. If it sounds good, it is good. But you don't have to focus on loudness, because, like I forgot his name, but the guy that mentioned that music is going to be compressed on YouTube, that simply happens. It's not going to be compressed, but it's simply the level is turned down, because YouTube, Spotify, everybody's using loudness normalization nowadays. All music on YouTube is minus 13 LUFS, loudness units full scale, minus 13 dB. Officially, you should not call it that way, but that's something different. And which means if you master the track at, let's say, minus 6 dB, it will simply be turned down 7 dB to get to minus 13. So the louder you go, the more you will be punished, the more your track will be turned down in level. And there's nothing you can do about it. It's something that YouTube, but also Spotify, iTunes, Apple Music, they all do it. And that's the cool thing. And that's really the end of the loudness war. And like I said, it sounds good at minus 3 dB. Cool, let's do this. But if it doesn't sound good at minus 3, which I will assume because that's way too loud, but then you simply lower the level a bit and it will sound good again. And that's what you're focusing on right now.
And how can you actually fix that as a producer? Like, what are the things that you could do as a producer to make sure your track performs the best on all those platforms?
First of all, YouTube, Spotify, they are all using a lossy format when it comes to audio. And what a lot of people don't realize is that digital clipping, so going into the reds, into sample peaks, is not a good thing. And it's not a good thing when it comes to WAV files. But it's even worse when you're going to convert to a lossy format like an MP3 or YouTube, whatever. And it's always good practice to have your maximum ceiling at something like -1 dB or something like that. Because
Okay.
then you don't have those intersample peaks and you don't have the shitty artifacts of the conversion. Well, you have them less. You will always have the artifacts of the conversion. Simple as that. But if you have a maximum peak value of something like -1, you're way more safe and way more, you have way better sound.
Okay. And is it the same
And
with club mixes?
yeah, and also one of the biggest mistakes that people make when they upload it to SoundCloud, but also YouTube, is that they upload an MP3 instead of a WAV file.
Hmm.
And what happens then is that you're uploading an MP3, but it's not like the audio stays that way. No, YouTube or SoundCloud is using its own MP3 conversion. So you get a transcoding. So basically, two layers of those MP3 artifacts on top of each other. Like you have a really low resolution picture, and you save it as a even more lower resolution picture. Yeah, and then you
Okay.
get the quality together with a bad sounding master, together with the digital clipping, together with the way loud master. It's a combination of a couple of things.
That's a good
One
tip
of the biggest
actually.
mistakes. Yeah, people are like,
That's
yeah, when I upload my music to SoundCloud, it sounds like crap. It sounds like an MP3. Yeah, because you uploaded an MP3. It sounds
okay.
like crap. That's
Good.
SoundCloud, but still.
Good tip. We got a
Yeah.
question in the live stream from Luco Music. Thanks for watching, Luco. He is asking, what's the best way to start with hardware? Like, where do I start when it comes down to hardware?
You mean like synthesizers and
Yeah,
things, or do you
probably
mean
like physical products, like not software,
the
but
product? Yeah.
yeah, you know.
Yeah. First of all, you need to go into the box in the end. So, what would be a good idea is to have a really good setup when it comes to DA conversion, so from digital to analog. But what's even more important then is the conversion from analog to digital,
Sorry,
because
he's saying
oh yeah, I
he
see
means
both
for
for mastering and
mastering.
mixing.
Oh,
Yeah, I see now as well. Yeah, okay. Yeah, but then actually the same, because if you're going to mix and master with hardware, you're going into the box again because the file needs to be digital. And then the AD conversion is the weak link. If you have a really shitty converter from analog to digital, you can have like a gazillion of euros on hardware, but it will simply sound like shit because the AD converter, um, yeah, smashes the life out of the actual sound from the hardware. So,
okay.
but the funny thing is that in the beginning I mentioned that if my studio would burn down, I would start with the room acoustics, the monitoring, and then a computer and things. And
Hmm.
to be honest, I would probably not even go with hardware anymore. I would simply go with plugins.
And that's because the hardware you have right now is from the past. You just bought it like 10 years
No, no,
ago and
no,
you still.
no. It's not like there is something about hardware. You can make a 95% great master with just plugins, and the other 5% is maybe hardware, or
Hmm.
maybe 10% or whatever. But nowadays, you can simply do a lot of cool things with plugins. Simple as that. And when it comes to hardware, yeah, you have to invest quite a lot of money in proper hardware for mastering, because if you're buying a pretty cheap compressor or a pretty cheap EQ, trust me, the plug-in version will simply be better than a cheap hardware.
Yeah.
And even then, let's say you pay 100 euros for the plug-in, you pay like 1,000 euros for the hardware. 1,000 euros is nothing for hardware when it comes to mastering.
Yeah.
So in parts alone, a Sontec EQ that I'm using, in parts alone, it was like 2,000 euros. And
Hmm.
then you need to build it as well. So yeah, you can't buy proper hardware equipment for 1,000 euro. The simplest that. Yeah. So simply go
When did that
for
shift actually? When did that shift actually happen? Because I still remember like 10 years ago when I started, all the producers were like, oh, you need to have hardware, you need to have hardware. And I
yeah.
actually never liked it because it isn't user friendly, like I like to work in the box where everything was connected to each other and worked the way I wanted it.
Yeah.
But when did that shift actually happen? That software beat hardware?
No, it's not like software beat it hardware. Definitely not, because there is
Okay.
something about hardware which you cannot reproduce yet with plugins. But like I said, I can make almost the same master with hardware, but I can also do kind of like the same master with just plugins. So that's what I meant actually. It's not like it's not always that when you have hardware you will have better masters. I see quite some mastering studios that have like a really big mastering studios with a lot of hardware, but the cool thing is they don't have any acoustical treatment or they have shitty monitors. I'm like, why?
Yeah.
I would sell the hardware, invest in monitoring and acoustical treatment and monitoring, and go with plugins. You can make better masters then. So yeah.
Okay, cool. No, thanks for the explanation. In the meanwhile, to everyone who just checked into the live stream, welcome. This guy is Jeffrey from the Goose Mastering. He's answering some questions today. So if you have a question about mastering or about studio acoustics, drop them in the comment section. And in the meanwhile, I was wondering, is it possible for you to switch your camera and to show us around in your studio, to show us which gear you have and why you use it?
Yeah, well, I will give it a try to see.
I think you can switch the camera as well.
Yeah, I see a button here. Is this going to work?
Yeah, there we go.
Working.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah. Okay. So this is basically my studio. We talked about acoustical treatment. You see a lot of bass trapping like going on there. Then you have the monitoring. In this case, I'm using the BMW 802s. They weigh like 80 kilos each. I'm not sure if you can see it, but there's also, because I wanted to have the bass, the speakers a tiny bit higher, I used concrete blocks. I made concrete blocks myself. It's not that hard. You simply buy concrete at a hardware shop. You make it sound so easy. You have to be careful because they weigh 60 kilos each. I think it was like 15 euros in concrete, but it's really heavy. So I had to get my neighbor out to put the speakers on top and put the concrete blocks in. But for the rest, I'm using a lot of hardware, and actually I built most of my hardware myself. So for instance, this is a tube compressor that I use a lot. It's kind of like based on a Fairchild compressor, but I redid it myself, and it's all done with stepped switches, so not like pot meters. Not sure if you can hear the clicks. But
yeah, you can hear the clicks. Yeah.
Yeah. Then I have it's also something that I built myself, a Sontec EQ clone. But in this case, it's not just a Sontec. The high shelving is from a Massenberg EQ, for instance, and I'm using fret 4-cell discrete op amps on the output. So it's really a one of a kind. The blue EQ is a Barry Porter EQ. It's a design from a guy, and his name was Barry Porter, of course. And he died, I think it was somewhere in 2001. But he left the design around, and everybody could use it the way they wanted it. And I was one of the first to build it with the actual design. So it's really a great EQ. It sounds really clean, but still it sounds analog. So for the rest, this is my monitor controller with digital controlled step switches with relays and things. This is it's also my mastering matrix with all the inserts, so I can switch just by clicking a button and things. I can insert and do a lot of things. And actually, I'm going to sell these things within a few weeks. I have the production version ready. So on the other side, I have some other tube compressors. This is another type of compressor. The other one was a Very Moo compressor. The green one is an optical tube compressor. It's totally different technology than a regular tube compressor. This is another compressor. It's a food control systems compressor. It's a VC8 compressor, so a bit like the SSL compressor, but this one goes way further than the regular VCA compressors. I really like the design, but I wanted to have some more control, so I built a separate box for it with sidechain options. So different sidechain frequencies, but you maybe know the API 2500 compressor.
Yeah, I like that one. From it's in the wave spec as well.
Sorry?
It's also in the wave spec,
it's in the wave
the
spec,
API.
It is, yeah. But I wanted more control, so I had to design the actual schematics for the API thrust circuit. And so I also have a thrust medium and a thrust high. So it's basically a SSL, an API, and the food control systems. It's a combination of a lot of compressors in one box or two boxes, depending on how you look at it.
Okay.
This is an EQ I built myself as well. It's based on the Maag EQ, the EQ 3D. And it was already a pretty old design, and I did it myself, and also with stepped switches, as you can hear. This is my DA converter, the Lynx high-low. And I think it's a cool converter because you have a separate DA converter and AD converter for your analog loop, and you also have a DA converter for your monitoring. And yeah, it's there, but on the other hand, it's not because it's that clean. So yeah, that's what I like about it. And I have a 3-screen setup. I have my main screen here in the desk, so you don't have, when you're sitting, you don't see the actual screen actually.
Oh,
and I also
nice,
have a really small screen. It looks like a big screen, but it's a 10-inch screen. If I
it's
put
like
my
an
hand
iPad.
here, it's like an iPad. When I put my hand here, you can see how big it is, and it's just for metering, and it's on the side, so you don't look at the screen when you're mastering. I'm using a fixed level, and I know by ear if it's loud enough or not, so I don't have to watch the meters actually. And I also have a big 42-inch screen on the floor. If you're sitting here, you can hardly see the screen.
That's nice.
So, and that's basically the screen that I use for my plugins. And the cool thing is that when I'm looking straight ahead, I don't see the screen, so I just use my ears.
Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing with mastering, right? Like you have to keep listening what actually happens when you touch a knob or where you twist something.
Yeah.
That's
And this is also something, maybe you've seen it before, the knob.
I like that one.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It behaves as a mouse, but it's a knob. If you can see how big it is if I put my hand here. It's really a big knob. And the cool thing is that you can change parameters in plugins, and because of that you can not look at the screen, but actually listen. So for instance, you're trying to find the right frequency spot for boosting and cutting a certain frequency. When you're looking at the screen and using the mouse, you will always think of like, okay, this is going to be the frequency to cut or boost or whatever. But if you're using the knob, you don't see what you're doing because you're not looking at the screen. You're just listening, and because of that, you make the right decisions.
And it's actually like a MIDI controller, right? You use it to...
No, it's a mouse. No, it's a mouse.
Oh, it's a mouse, yeah.
When you touch it, when you grab it, sounds dirty. If you grab the knob, then it's the same as as clicking your mouse. And when you're clicking the mouse to change a parameter like clicking the mouse, you do this and then you change it up and down. But when you do that, you're clicking it, and when you hold it and drag it or turn it, then you're changing the parameter.
That
so
looks
pretty
nice.
Cool.
And is it something we can buy, or is it something you build yourself?
Yeah. It's a German company called Knob Control, NOB Control, and I bought it back then for I think €100 or something like that because it used to be a Kickstarter thing.
It's not that expensive.
Now you're paying something like €200, but I simply cannot live without it. Usually it's in brown wood, by the way. I painted it myself because
I like it better this way because last time we were in your studio, it was wooden, I think.
Yeah, like wood, like let's see, this type of wood.
Exactly. So, This I like this one. Okay, man. Yeah, looks really nice. And looking at the comments, a lot of people like your studio as well. So thanks for showing us around there.
You're welcome.
I actually have a few more questions for you. If you do, you have some time left?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, cool. Let's go. We have a question from Robin Hallison. How to get your track sound commercially loud, and how loud should tracks be today?
How loud should tracks be today? Loud enough, but not too loud. There is no number. That's the cool thing. I said it before. A lot of people are like, yeah, Spotify is at -14 and YouTube is at -13. How loud should I make my tracks? But that's the cool thing nowadays, that you don't have to focus on loudness. No. As long as it's between Mine is 13, which is Spotify, YouTube, and whatever. You're all fine. It doesn't matter how loud it is. The loudness war is over. I see it every day nowadays because, let's say 1.5, 2 years ago, one of the first things that I heard when I got into contact with a new customer was like, I want it to be as loud as possible. Nowadays, they're like, I don't want to win the war. It needs to be dynamic. I don't want it to be loud. I just want it to sound good. And sometimes I'm even doing masters that are not even that loud, but they're like, oh wow, the master is great. But could you make it a tiny bit less loud? Because I think it might even sound better when it's less loud.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the cool. So commercially loud. What's commercially loud?
Yeah, as long as it sounds good.
Yeah, good.
Okay.
Is the new loud.
Good is the new loud. That's a good one. Yeah, nice.
Yeah. And actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a lot of people don't even realize is that if you have a dynamic track, so the break is a tiny bit less loud than the rest of the track, that track will sound louder on Spotify than a really loud track. Because the actual measurement is taking place on the complete track, from start till end. So it could be that the louder parts will sound louder when you master it less loud. So it actually works.
Yeah, that's what you also meant with the YouTube uploads, right? That they bring shit down when you put it too loud. Okay. Yeah. Another question I have from Wind Noise here on Instagram is, what is the order of plugin you put on a standard master? Like where should you put like the EQ, the tape? Is there a certain order you have to look at?
Standard rule, no. You can use, for instance, if you have an EQ and a compressor in a row, you can use them in both ways. If you have the EQ first and then the compressor, and if you want it to respond more to the low frequencies, you can boost the low frequencies, for instance. Or if you want it to respond less to the low frequencies, you can cut those low frequencies. And if you do it the other way around, it compresses and then you EQ, and then the compression doesn't react to how your EQ settings are. So there are no rules. Whatever sounds good. And it's the same with compression. A lot of people are like, yeah, you should always use a compressor, or even worse, a multiband compressor. A lot of times I don't even use compression at all, because if a track doesn't need compression, why should I add a compressor? If it sounds good without compression, don't do it. Don't use it.
And that all refers back to keep on listening. You know, I also noticed that a lot of people tend to they want to have these visuals and they want to see if everything's right, but there are no rules. If it sounds well, it sounds well. That's I think the most important thing.
Those are the most important equipment things in my studio. Yeah.
Cool. I just really want to thank you. I think we almost made it to an hour today, so that's pretty long. I think we got a lot of knowledge today. Yeah, time flies, right? Thanks again. I really like this format here on Instagram with all the people checking in and having the interaction with the people. Hope you liked it too. This video will appear on YouTube and on Facebook as well. So if people want to look back at the whole episode, that's possible. Thanks, Jeffrey, for now. Thanks for being a part of this, and I'll see you soon.
Definitely. Talk soon, man.
Have a good day.
Okay, same to you.
Bye.
See you, man. Bye-bye.